Hello and welcome to another of my comedians interviews for my blog Arichcomiclife. My name is Richard Gill and my blog charts the experiences of watching over 750 comedians and counting over the last 45 years. I'm delighted today to welcome my guest Vix Leyton. Yes! Hello.
Hi.
How are you? You all right?
I'm very well.
Good.
Yes. All the better for seeing you.
Oh, you're too
Enjoy.
kind. Thank you so much for doing this. It's going to be an interview about your comedy career to date. We're going to go right back.
Won't take long.
No, that's not true, and you know it. We're going to go right back to the start, and I believe your background was in public relations. Is that correct?
Well, it's still my foreground. It's still
yeah.
still my day job. So.
How did you become a comedian?
Well, it was an accident, really. I do PR, as I said, as my day job,
Yeah.
and as part of my role, occasionally I was being asked to speak at conferences, and I was too scared to do them because I had this phobia of public speaking that just got worse and worse as the years went by. And I was also the person that went to conferences and moaned there weren't enough women speakers. So I was moaning about the problem, but I was not prepared to be part of the solution. So I signed up for a stand-up comedy skills course because I thought that would get me over the nerves enough to be able to start doing that. And I really got a lot out of the day, like more out of the day than I expected, because I've always enjoyed making people laugh in that kind of pub way.
Yeah.
When you've got a story to tell and everyone's listening and you really sort of lean into it. So I always enjoyed that element of my life. But as I was leaving the course leader, Lynn Parker, said, "So what are you doing next about your comedy?" And I was like, what am I doing next about my comedy? Until that point, I wasn't aware I had any comedy to be doing. And I was like, what am I doing next, actually? And I thought about it, doing something a bit more formalized in the course, and everybody else was really buzzing, and it was a really, really lovely, supportive room. But I was still really scared. Like, I enjoyed it. I pushed myself, and I was exhilarated that I'd managed to push myself to do this course and perform in front of the other 10 people on the course.
Yeah.
But still scared.
Yeah.
And so I put it on Facebook and Twitter and just said, I've done this stand-up comedy course. Don't know what to do next. Anyone got any ideas? Everyone agreed on social that it was great for me to do that, but nobody had anything practical to offer me. So I thought, well, there we go then. I've tried my best. I got one post on Twitter. That's all I can do. That's fine. Clearly this is not the path for me. And lovely comedian Mark Watson tweeted me, and he was doing one of his ridiculous and amazing marathon shows and looking for people to take part in challenges for charity as part of the day. And he said, do you want to learn stand-up and try and get over this fear as part of my show? And because he was my favourite comedian, and I just wanted him to be my friend. I was yeah, sure, that sounds like something I want to do. And I was so scared and so nervous, and I nearly didn't go right up until the last minute. I'd gone to work that day, and it was a 26.2 hour show to match the 26.2 miles of a marathon.
Yeah.
So, it started at 9 o'clock, and it was going to go all the way through to midnight, basically the next day. And I was really nervous. And right up until I left in the taxi to go to the Pleasance, I didn't think I was going to go. But the idea of letting down somebody that I was such a huge fan of pushed through my nerves, and I managed to get there. And it just escalated from there.
Well, I've seen you many times. I think there is an enormous comic talent there, and I find it staggering that you suffered so badly with the nerves and the public speaking. And I think it's just wonderful what you've done to progress.
It was a really physical response as well. I got myself in such a lather before I had to speak in front of anybody that I'd feel sick, I'd have a headache. At one speaking engagement, I was so nervous. I made myself so sick with worry the day before. I was convinced that I had norovirus. Right. And as soon as I emailed them to say that I couldn't do the talk, it just disappeared. So I just wound myself up so much that I had this terrible physical response. The least said about that, the better details-wise. But
Well, if it helps you at all, I remember a story when I was in the civil service, and we had to stand up and teach somebody something, and it was going to be recorded. And I only know one card trick, and I stood up and I completely forgot it. I just panicked. So, you know.
I think the power is knowing
You're
that
not
even
alone.
if that happens to you, that there's, even if you do forget everything and the worst happens, like, you're not going to die.
No, exactly.
And it was just
exactly.
like, of all the things,
Yeah,
of all the consequences, looking a bit silly.
Exactly.
I it just didn't. Yeah, it's the wiring was faulty.
I first saw you at Birdie's comedy night doing 5 minutes. What was your first gig like? Was it somewhere like there? Was it there, or?
It was shortly before that, actually. I think that was my fifth or sixth gig that I first met you on, which was, that feels like a million years ago, but it was only 2-ish years ago.
That's the amazing thing. We're going to come on to this later, your work ethic.
My first official gig, I met Tom Tuck at the Comedy Marathon show, and he coached me in like writing a set, because part of the day I wrote a really, looking back, terrible 5 minutes. Right. But he came and like interrogated it and sat next to me and went through the workings of it with me. And then I added him on Facebook and on Twitter, because that's what I do. I'm like, someone is nice to me, I'm like, a friend. And
that's how it works.
And he was following me on Twitter, and then he DM'd me and said, a couple of weeks after the show, we're doing a night next week. Do you want to be on the bill? And so I did my first gig at ACMS in the Phoenix, which was like such a hallowed stage. It's a really, really cool venue to be in. And they were the nicest people in the world. I was spoilt by that audience, and they were underserved by a terrible set of mine. And they were so supportive and so kind. And I think if it had been anything less than that level of support at that night, I probably wouldn't have done another one. But I had the bug then. So
I think you certainly need the support to carry on, but I also think it's all about experience. The more you do, the better you can get at it, and you think, I'm doing all right at this. This is okay. Would you agree?
Yeah, to a degree. I think, though, the more I cared about it, the more nervous I was to be good, because I think the first 6 months I was so overwhelmed by the fact that I was even doing it. Like, getting up there was the win for me, because it was so out of my comfort zone that it didn't really matter how the material landed. And then as that faded away, I started to get more nervous about it being good, and being more meticulous. And I had a real thing, because open mic can be quite small. It's quite a small community. It's huge in theory. It's huge in London because there are so many venues doing it, but you find yourself often on the same circuit as other people doing open mic. I was very aware that the people that were in the rooms with me, because I committed to doing 100 gigs in a year, because a comedy promoter told me that I couldn't call myself a comedian until I'd done 100 gigs. So I was like, right, I'll show you. So I committed to doing...
You were determined, I'll give you that.
I committed to doing this 100 gigs in a year. And so I saw pretty much everybody. I think I saw every new comedian at that level.
That's brilliant. You're
100
gigs
and 10 acts just thrown on the spot. Yeah. And some of them had like 20 people on. Like some bills were absolutely stacked. You'd see like 20 acts in a night, and you'd arrive, it would start at 8 and you'd still be there at 11. So I saw so much comedy.
There's only so much clapping you can do. 3 hours is a bit much.
And I found like there were pieces of material that I really liked and that I enjoyed doing, but I was really hyper aware of doing the same thing in front of the same people over and over again. So I tried to change my sets every time, which was quite tiring and not always worth the effort. Like, so I would just do something new that I thought of earlier in the day and be like, right, I'm going to test this here and now.
Yeah. I've spoken to a few comedians about this, about repeating the same material, and I think part of it is the way it's delivered and the way it's put across to an audience. So do you agree with that, or do you fiercely try, as you said, you fiercely try and write new as often as you can, or?
I think I'm glad that I did it now, knowing what I know about last year and how few opportunities there were to perform. I'm glad that I tried a lot of things, and then I've got all these little blocks that you can then put together into sets. So based on what I think people are going to like, and you can switch them out quite quickly. Because I was trying to write an hour's worth of material about being petty, because I was going to take that to the Fringe. So I always had that in the back of my mind, which meant that there was always a route through, because everything was vaguely about the petty life that I lead. You could swap things in and swap things out quite easily.
I don't believe that for a minute.
I think you know me better than to even pretend that you don't believe that about me. But so I'm glad that I tried a lot in front of live audiences, because they're few and far between now. But I'm also, I kind of wish I'd stuck with A5,
right,
and run it. So maybe 50% new material and treating it as new material nights, and 50% of polishing. Because I'm not quite sure I have got the 5. If I got the call, for example, to do like live at the Apollo, like, because every other comedian got norovirus and was being sick, and they were like, there's only one comedian in London that is left to do it.
Send me in the audience for it.
But if I got that call, if I got that call, my worry is now I don't have a 5 that I feel really confident on. I've got all these little bits and pieces. But I don't have a perfect set that I could roll out every time, and I think I wish I did. So that's something that I'm now going to try and work on in the Zoom gigs.
So, is there a? I was going to ask what you like to talk about on stage. Is there a specific theme, or is it just what comes to mind? How do you go about doing that? Just the whimsy of life, and like how ridiculous normal life is. And, I love the comedians that I love, are the comedians that take something that you do every day. And make that hilarious. Like, they're the people that I really rate. And I know, because like a lot of my friends don't, like, they prefer the sort of cooler, edgier comedians. But for me, it's always been people like Michael McIntyre, who can take something as mundane as queuing in the airport and just make it something where you're crying with laughter. And it's, if you think you could do it yourself, you're like, yeah, I agree. And I think there's some real magic in that, because then you try and tell a story in that style, and you realize actually that the workmanship and the technical ability to do that is extraordinary. So that's what I kind of aspire to. I want people to go away from a show of mine, maybe see something that I've brought up like weeks later and go, oh my god, it's what that comedian said. Like that's the dream for me. When people go away and remember my joke and maybe tell someone else, like, oh, I saw a comedian do this. And that's what I want for me. I work on a school reception, and all the teachers that go into the school every day, I always tell them jokes from the online comedy nights I've seen the previous week. And I test the laughs.
Do you tell them they're not your jokes?
Oh yeah, nick them all. But it's fascinating what you say, because I too love comedians who can take one word and just fly with it. It's extraordinary. Billy Connolly is a classic example. Robin Williams is another classic example. Ross Noble as well. Did you ever find it difficult at all to break through into comedy? I'm not talking about your personal circumstances. I'm talking about getting gigs, or trying to progress. You said before about Mark Watson. He's obviously a mentor to you.
That definitely helps.
But is it all about who you know, or is it all about the experience of doing it, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a mix of all those things, to be honest. Like, I was never necessarily short of gigs to do, but in terms of gigs that had an audience and always had a good audience in, like people like you who love comedy and love it in its rawest form, and you get a lot of joy seeing it as a germ of an idea and then seeing it more polished further down the road. A lot of people don't. It's a very specific type of audience member. So a lot of the open mics I was doing, I was just performing to other comedians, and that doesn't really get you any further, because they're so focused on their own performance and their own notes. They're not necessarily giving you the feedback you need to get any better. So it's not, sometimes it's not as, you might as well be at home doing it to your cat. So
Right.
in terms of,
You can't
I think
like
London,
jokes.
yeah, London is a privileged place because there is so much. There were before lockdown so many open mics available.
Yeah.
You could do one every night of the week, and I was doing one every night of the week. But the ones that I wanted to do were quite oversubscribed, and then it's like a sophisticated tier system of people who've been around the longest, people who buy drinks at the bar because the venue want the drinks revenue on a quiet night, and that's how you get to keep the night. There's a lot of politics in it, and I was privileged in that I'm a bit older and I've got a good job, so I was able to go for the night, buy a couple of drinks, stay behind at the end, buy a drink for the promoter of the night, the MC, and get to know them a little bit better, and then it is a lot easier to get on the bills. It's just networking. So, and I know a lot of people weren't able to do that because they were, they had a different job, they were working different hours, they had to go straight home, they couldn't afford to buy a wine because they were like a university student and they were doing this 5 nights a week. I was lucky I started later, I think, because it certainly, to a degree, I think there was a lot of privilege that enabled me to go a bit quicker.
Well, I've seen you many times, and I think there's something very special. I've said this to you many times. I've seen you many times host a comedy night. Do you prefer comparing to performing, and why?
The comparing was an accident, really, because as you say, in terms of getting ahead, I was too new for anybody to really trust me with the reins of their night, letting me have a go or letting me have 10 minutes or longer sets. So I thought, how can I have longer sets and have a go at emceeing? I'll put my own night on. So that's
extraordinary.
That's how I was able to.
That's why I asked the question, because you're one of the few, certainly newish comedians I know who went from performing straight away to running their own night, and that has got to be commended. That is extraordinary.
Well, I noticed a lot of the nights had a lot of potential and they were really good, but because my day job's marketing, I was like, I know I could fill this night, and I was giving a lot of like unsolicited advice at the end of nights to promoters about how I thought they could do it better, which fair enough, really, they were not interested in my point of view. But I thought, you know what? Hello, I'm new to comedy, I've been doing this a few months.
I think you should do it this way. What do you think?
I knew I could. I just knew, like, from the day job, because I do a lot of events work as part of it. I know how to run an event from end to end. Like, I know how to get people in. I know how to advertise it. And I thought, even if I'm rubbish, if I book good people and the experience is nice, then they're still going to have a great time. I get to learn on the job. I'm not putting anybody else's reputation at risk by absolutely driving somebody else's night into the wall. And it was really fun. But I do think, I've got a bit lazy now. That's the trouble. MCing is an absolute joy. If you get good people on, it's so much fun. And it's a funny old balance, because if somebody absolutely smashes it, you kind of have to bring people back down. For the next person to not meet unreal expectations. And if somebody has not had a good night, you have to bring them back up again so they don't blame the night and turn off for the next person. So if you have a challenging night or a challenging audience, it is difficult, but you come away feeling so good. If you manage to get the balance right, you book good people, the audience has loved it. It's such a buzz. But also it's enabled me to be very lazy. Because I'm, like I said, I'm not confident I've got a winning 5 or a winning 10. So instead of me putting the work in this year to having a winning 5 and 10, I just host and then I chat. And then I can just bring out my little threads of ideas that I enjoy doing, and nobody has to know. I
think as well.
It's cowardly to host, really.
Once you've got your night going, though, word of mouth gets you more popular acts that you want, that you've been after, that you're trying to get. So it helps everybody out. It gives you exposure, and it gives the acts exposure as well. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm obsessed with having a good audience in. That'll be the thing that I worry about most. When I'm like, if a night hasn't sold as well as I'm expecting it, like the day before, I am hustling all day.
Well, I try and get to everyone,
friends and family down.
I do
mean,
try.
the last, yeah, the last few have like sold out, and it's been absolutely brilliant. But they've sold out because social distancing rules means you can only have 20 people, which is a shame. But yeah, that buzz, getting that buzz in a room, is what I want comedians to go away and talk about to other comedians. So then when I'm booking them, they can go, "Oh yeah, that is a good night. Actually, people were really up for it, and they're really nice."
Yeah.
That's the dream.
That's brilliant. You've mentioned before, of course, Mark Watson as your main mentor. Have you had any more mentors that have helped you on your comic journey?
The comedy industry is absolutely, it's just full of extraordinarily kind people. Like, I've encountered so many just genuinely lovely, supportive, real pros as well, like people that I've been admiring for a long time. So like Jen Brister is probably, like, she was the first person that I booked for my first comedy night that I put on, and I DM'd her and I said, look, I want to put this comedy night on. I've got this idea of doing a really like safe, nice night that women will feel comfortable doing, because that's not always true with open mic, and it's not always the promoter's fault, but you're in like dodgy areas sometimes, in pubs that are scary to look at from the outside, because this is where you're able to get the space. And I wanted to do something where you walk in, you feel safe, you feel like you can deliver your best performance. There weren't that many female run open mic nights either, so that was something else that I thought I could offer. Explained this all in quite a drunk DM to her, and she came back and said, yes, I will headline this.
She was,
and
she was clearly sober.
Yeah, exactly. But she's just been such a massive support ever since. And I'm such a bloody pest. But she did my first Comedy Roulette, which is the Twitch show that I did last summer. She was part of the first one of those. And everyone I've met has just been so open to giving advice, being supportive, putting me in touch with other people. So I've been really lucky. Yeah, Jen's amazing. Beck Hill has been an absolutely brilliant influence on me. Fiona Allen from who I was like, she was such a trailblazer with Smack the Pony when I was like a teenager. Like, I was such a huge fan, and when I booked her and she came down and did the night, took the time to speak to everybody.
It was lovely to have her back.
Just brilliant.
She was superb. Because I was there in the audience, and it's as though she'd never gone away. She was so good. And like, it wasn't stand-up that she was doing, she was sketch. So to come back and like try a new discipline and be so immediately good at it, it's not a surprise that it is. It's inspirational when you see somebody control the crowd like that. Sarah Keyworth as well was probably the first person I saw absolutely demolish a heckler with the most beautiful good grace. Like, it wasn't aggressive, it was this annoying person who was at my night, and I was mortified because I love Sarah Keyworth and she's been heckled on my night, so I felt as responsible as if I was heckling. To be honest, it might as well have been me doing the heckling. I was mortified. And it was just a drunk woman, like, being a bit mouthy, and like, it wasn't harsh. She's superb at dealing with an audience, though, Sarah Keyworth.
She just made it part of the show. She never revealed, she was not impatient, she was not rude to the heckler. She made it a part of the show, and it was almost better for it, because it was just, we were all with her and it was so much fun. But yes, so graciously done, not aggressive, not angry, just flawless. And that was the first time I've ever seen a heckler addressed like that, in a less kind of working man's like humiliate that person way, because that's the only way I'd really seen it done. So I'd gone to a lot of sort of like late night comedy shows where it is more combative. So to see her talk someone down like that again, I was like, this is incredible. And that's just part of the skill set. I've been in
audiences that are just the riots. One of the worst ones, I've mentioned this before, was Ricky Grover on stage at Headliners, and he was doing his set, and there was a really awful audience member that was annoying everybody. So he stopped the set, jumped down, threw him out, and he came back on to the Rocky theme because he was an ex-boxer. And cheers, and he took the night off. It was fantastic. So they can turn, they can obviously turn it favourable, which is what you want. But that was memorable. You mentioned at the start about public speaking and nerves and everything. Do you get nerves before you go on stage, and how do you cope with them?
Like I said, I've still got this residual energy about me of, this is far beyond my wildest dreams. I never thought this was on the cards for me, which does tend to carry me through. So as much as you do get nervous because you want to put on a good show, I think the baseline is just excited.
It's adrenaline. I'm always excited now,
to get out there. Yeah.
Wow.
And I've not lost that. So.
No. Your show about pettiness. How would you describe your writing process when you do actually write? Do you have pointers that take you from stage to stage, or do you write everything down and then try and put it in a logical order? How do you go about it?
I've got a massive document in my phone with just all these bits and pieces, and some of them are word for word written out skits. Some of them are just trigger words where I've experienced something funny over the course of the day, and I'm like, I need to remember that because I'm going to come back to it. So it's
you
all
write down your ideas.
Most of it. Yeah, I think about 70% of it is true, true stories, and then there's 30% margin where I amp it up for dramatic effect. So something that I've thought of, a comeback that I've thought of, but when I tell the joke, I've said it. It's those little tricks. But most of it is based in truth, which makes it quite fun. It's more fun to tell, and then it's quite cathartic. So if something awful is happening to me, I can kind of write a little joke about it in my head, and I'm sort of out of the situation. So when I got bothered, so I think you've seen me tell the story about the weird man on the train that wanted to massage my feet. I was really scared in that moment because I was on my own on a train, but there was a little voice in the back of my head going, I can't wait to tell this.
This is material.
I'd started to write it into a joke. I was like, if I'm not murdered, this is going to be solid material. But do you know what? It isn't. At the moment, I can't find a finish to that joke.
Right.
And I did Shappi Sandy's Soho Theatre Boot Camp, and she said she had a joke that's quite similar, that's quite hard hitting. And I've been trying to think of an ending that relieves the tension that people feel, and it's like Hannah Gadsby plays with it when in her show, where she said, you're waiting for the tension to be relieved, and I can't find a way to make that story okay, because it was scary, it was not a nice thing, it's something that women put up with every day, and then you start to think to yourself, am I making light of something that people shouldn't be laughing at because it's quite a serious thing? And there are laughs in it because it's so ludicrous, but I think there is a thin line in making a trauma a joke. Yeah. So I couldn't finish that joke because I didn't want people to feel happy with the ending. I didn't want them to feel like they'd let out a breath, because it was like, I didn't until I ran home. It's like, oh, ha, 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 that guy thought we were going to go out on a date. But I ran all the way home. As soon as I turned off the station, I ran all the way back to the house, and I didn't feel safe until I was inside. Wow. So I was like, that's not funny. And that happens to some people, and some people, they don't run away home. Some people, I found it too hard to reconcile in my head, making light of something that wasn't very funny. And I think there are two ways of looking at it. It's educational for men to hear that, because that was just an everyday experience. Yeah. And so there's some education point in it where maybe they'll go away and think of it. But again, I don't think it's funny. So I kind of parked that joke. I just couldn't come up with an ending for it.
When comedians think of ideas, it always reminds me of Les Dawson's elongated words. I am a massive fan of Les Dawson, and he can describe so many long convoluted words. There's a classic one about the night sky, and he goes on about moonbeams transferring across the sky, and on and on and on for 10 minutes, and then the punchline is, and then I looked up to the sky and suddenly realized this outside toilet needs lagging. Because the roof was on. So there's always the punch. But it does depend on what you're talking about, like you say, and I think you're right to park that particular routine, because you want it to be hard hitting, but ultimately you want it to be funny, and that wasn't funny. So
because I couldn't finish it, and then the next poor person coming on after my TED talk about men who was sexual predators had a right shocker.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Following on from the writing process, how do you remember all your stories and routines?
I've never had a problem with it. I've always
have you got a good memory?
As part of my job, as part of my job, you kind of have to remember your key messages all the time for whatever branch you're working at. So, yeah. And I think maybe that will change a little bit when I've got a bigger breadth of work.
Right.
Like 10 years later, I'm probably there are already jokes that I forget that I've got, and then I'll come back to them like old friends, and be like, "Oh yes, think about birthday cake." So
I'll be there.
But yeah, I've never really had a problem with things. Like occasionally people have managed to convince me, so I'm quite suggestible. So if they're sitting there with their full notes and like their hands with all the jokes in the back of it, sometimes they're able to convince me that maybe I'm going to forget them, and then I'll be like, I'll write these notes on my hand as well. But for me, it's more, I think, it's like learning lyrics to a song, I guess. I know the pace of the material, so I know the tune. So it's easier to put the words to the tune, so I know where things are going to land. And I think that's how I remember things. I know the start and I know where I want to get to. And so the bits in the middle, how I get there can vary very wildly.
The reason why I asked the question is because other than this blog, the most creative thing I ever did was write a play and appear in a play, which I performed for Comic Relief with a friend of mine, and the play's called The Applicant, and it's about a bloke who never gets a job, and it's set in a interview room where he's in the waiting room, and then he gets interviewed by the interviewee, and then another one happens and another interview happens, and with me sitting there on my own, I've got the audience to talk to, so that's how I build the story up. So I wrote all these monologues, and then the interviewer comes on, and the first night we put it on, I ran out. I was like a rabbit in headlights. And I said, "Hello, my name's Norman Hope," and forgot the 6 pages of monologue. And I thought, we've rehearsed this for 10 weeks. I've even written this, So it's.
So is it just nerves? Like what happened?
Well, the interviewer quickly came on to a light switch, and then once he was on, it was perfect, and I never forgot. We did 3 shows, and I got better each time I did it. But I'd been in a few.
I'd been in. The thing about it is the audience doesn't know.
Well,
unless
that's
it's
the thing.
like a Shakespeare play. Unless you give it away, you could say anything. They don't know.
Well, it was like I had a great joke because his name was Norman Oliver Hope, so it was no hope, of course, for the job. But his dad worked in a sweet shop. He was from Carlisle. He supported Carlisle United. He was in London with his successful girlfriend. And it was on and on and on and on. So I just kept putting these pointers out. Hello, yes, my name's Norman Oliver Hope. My dad runs a sweet shop. It's just pointless. And they're all going. But it was the most nerve-wracking, one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever done, because I'd done some amateur dramatics previously, and I was all right at that. But I had like a 10-year gap, and when I was in the civil service, I did a lot of plays for them, and I enjoyed doing that. But then it was like such a break, and then to come back, it was daunting. So remembering the routine is fantastic when I sit there and laugh, and I'm thinking, how on earth do you remember all that? It's wonderful.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll fare as well with the 45 minutes. Like,
no, I've got every faith in you.
Yeah. But like I said, the thing is, like, the freeing thing for me is always nobody knew what I had planned.
Yeah.
So if I deviate from it and end up doing something else, if I don't give it away, no one ever has to know.
Exactly.
And I think before I used to panic.
Yeah.
If I went off and people could see it, and then they started to panic, and then the energy would change. But now I just blithely just push through.
I panicked and I learned.
Yeah. You just held it together. No one has to know.
To date, what has been your comedy highlight? Have you had one?
Oh, that's tricky, actually. Yeah, everything's been a highlight for me. I think that first day was probably amazing because the marathon show. Because I've got notes in my notebook. Rufus Harron wrote me a set. I was on stage. I got coached by Ian Stone at one point. Yeah. He gave me like a session on like putting material together. That's where I met loads of people who are like now my friends. So like Lulu Popperwell, who's an amazing comedian, did my first session with me. She was the first person that I went away with and spoke to. She has. He was there that night, and you're just finding this new community that I wanted to be part of. It was like a little missing piece. So I don't think anything will ever be as exciting as that again for a long time. But putting the summer show on as well, because I managed to find some shows over the summer in between lockdowns. So putting on that first outdoor show,
plus as
where comedy was back,
all your online shows, they are big affairs. They really are. I mean, you know, you invite in the comedians, but you're in the driving seat, and that's wonderful, because you've done what now? Something like 110, 120 proper gigs, something like that, is it? Or is it more?
I think like 130-ish. Because I managed to do quite a lot in between lockdown. I signed up for everything. I was like...
but that is good going. You know, doing the amount of work that you do is extraordinary, but it's like fun work, because it's something. It's like me. I'm like passionate about this. I hope you can see I'm passionate about what I'm talking about. And I find that with you. I think you're like a breath of fresh air when you go on a stage, and it's like, here we go, make me laugh, and you've never failed. It's wonderful.
I love the nights as well. Like, I love all the open mic nights. I love good comedians. I love terrible ones. Like, whenever I went to the open mics, I would treat it like a night out. A lot of people were treating it like work, but even 100 gigs in, I was thrilled to see people I'd seen before, people I'd seen for the first time. The joy of like, I wonder what this person's going to be like trying to predict what they're going to do. Like, I do love comedy, and like, I will be sitting at shows that I'm supposed to be hosting, just like not timing anyone, because I'm just having such a lovely time. I'm looking at other people having a lovely time. It's an absolute dream.
Normally me convulsing in the front row. Do you have any ambitions as a comedian? You asked me this when you interviewed me a few months ago.
And now you're doing this.
And now I'm doing this, which is extraordinary. I know. This is an ambition. I'm like the Parkinson of comedy now, I think. But do you have any ambitions?
I think I'd like to be known by other comedians as someone who's good at comedy. That's probably the thing that I want most. Like people like Rich Wilson, who you meet, and no one's got a bad word to say about him. If he's on a night, lovely, like comedians are fans of his, as much as like the crowd's really, you know, it's gonna be a good night when he's in, because he's so just great. Funny. It is absolutely effortless, and like the comics on the bill with him are always excited that he's there, and that's the kind of thing I want. I'd love that, to be sort of recognised and respected in that kind of way. Like,
that's brilliant.
So it's less about like TV stuff, and it's more about just being bloody good.
Yeah,
like
that's a great answer. Who are your favourite comedians, past and present?
Eddie Izzard was my Eddie Izzard by far my absolute standout number one for life. Their comedy, I had all of the videos, not even DVDs. I had all their videos, and I used to watch them like I would listen to albums, like with the same kind of, I could listen to it over and over again and find something new in it, or just find something reassuring. Like, they taught me everything probably about how to time jokes, how to set jokes up, the surreal, bringing surreal into the everyday. Like, absolutely, like my proper comedy idol. Like, Mark was one, because when I started going to, Glee Club came to Cardiff. It was very exciting when I was 21. And before that, there weren't really any comedy venues. You'd only see big comedians, because we only had venues for big comedians. So we had, like, the smallest we have was the Sherman Theatre, which I think was about 300 capacity.
Right.
So there wasn't you wouldn't see many circuit comedians necessarily bother to come. You'd see them in St. David's Hall, which was the bigger place. So it would be big names. It was like Michael McIntyre, Ricky Gervais, Tim Minchin, putting on a proper show. But then Glee came along, and it was, 4 comedians on a bill. And it was a big, night out. So I started going to Glee, which is where I came across, I think, first properly came across Mark Watson. And it was Mark Watson and John Richardson, one of the first nights I went down. Like, I loved it was like the best night ever. I was like, these guys are amazing.
Watson is exceptional, isn't he? He's so supportive as well as being very, very funny. He's just a funny man. It's great to watch him. The reason why
spend 10 minutes with someone and you feel like they're your friends.
Yeah,
and I think
exactly,
that is like a real skill with comedians. Where you're like, I'd love to have a conversation in the pub about this. I've got loads of stuff to say.
The reason why I say that is that there's a section on my blog called The Ones That Got Away, and I've listed 25 comedians who I would have loved to have seen, but they've either died or I've been unable to see them. And the top of the list for me was Morecambe and Wise. There is something else. I'd put Eddie Izzard in this bracket. There's something else than just telling a story. They do something, or they come on and they react to something, and they are just hysterically funny before they even begin. And that's the pinnacle, I think. With Eric Morecambe, it was his glasses, or Tommy Cooper had his fairs, or French and Saunders. Dawn French got a funny face, and I find it fascinating because I ask the question to a lot of the comedians that have been on before, and it's interesting, a lot of the answers. But Eddie Izzard's very, very special. Like me, do you go to a lot of comedy as a member of the audience?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. It's like embarrassing, I think, sometimes, or it feels like I feel a bit awkward about it because I'm still a fan first and foremost.
Yeah.
So even people I've booked and sort of, I'm like broadly appear in their eyes, and then I'll be sat at the front, like doing massive heart eyes at them, tweeting them afterwards, going, "This is amazing! This is the best thing I've ever seen." Like Jess Foster's Hent show, I saw that 3 times in a way that would feel weird anyway, but now I'm also trying to book her for stuff. It's like, aren't you that? Yes, I am.
She is so. What I love about her is that there's an underlying anger to a routine that is relatable to everybody in the audience. She's brilliant.
Jen Brister said I wasn't allowed to see her show in Edinburgh because I'd seen it too many times already, because I went to a lot of the work in progresses. But I was just fascinated to see it come on. From like on paper, working it out. Every time I saw her, it was better. And because I wanted to do a fringe run as well, like the process was as interesting to me as the joke.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's interesting because it happens to me all the time. I see so many of the comedians do the work in progress that when I go to Edinburgh, I've seen a lot of the shows. And one of the funniest stories was Ian Sterling. I'd seen him do a lot of previews, and I went with a friend of mine to see him in a little tiny room, and it was packed out with all women and in the audience. And I walked past and I sat down, and he's sitting in the dark, and he's got a little microphone. He's in pitch black, and he just goes, "All right, Rich, how are you?" And everybody around went, "Who the hell is that?" And I'm thinking,
VIP is here, guys. It's a VIP in.
and I thought, well, he obviously thinks that I know his show, and of course he did it again. But it's the as I say, it's the delivery of it. I don't mind watching comedians again and again and again with the same material if they're genuinely funny. And one that comes to mind for me is Paul McCaffrey. That he is possibly my current favourite comedian. I've seen him so many times, and he just reduces me to crying, which I've very rarely do. But anyway, not about him, it's about you. Thank you so much for your time. Just before you go, is there anything anything else you would like to say? Would you like to plug any blogs, any writing, anything? Where can people find you?
Well, I've got a podcast, Rich, that started as a Twitch show last summer. So it's a female-fronted panel show, which you can count the amount of those on one hand. So that's quite exciting. It's been quite exciting to do. It's basically an excuse to get all my favourite comedians to be on a Zoom call with me. So,
But no, it was a success. Yeah. It was a success. Yeah.
It's going really well. So it's called Comedy Arcade.
The Comedy Arcade is going really well.
It's going all right, isn't it? So I get 3 comedians in, and they have to tell anecdotes competitively, and I judge which one I find the funniest and pick a winner. So I've got loads of random topics in a ball. I'll draw a topic. They don't know what's coming. They'll come up with a story. I'll judge it based on what I like. It's complete nonsense, my scoring system, and it's just been really great. It's been a nice excuse to hear different stories from comics, because because if you've seen them a lot, you've heard a lot of a lot of anecdotes, a lot of their journey, how they got into comedy, for example. You hear that in different versions of it, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. So it's been really fun.
The Comedy Arcade, that there was a previous version of it where you invited me on it as one of the guests, which was extraordinary.
You were part of the show. You were part of the beta show. Before it was arcade, it was roulette. So
one of your subjects, which you told me in advance, was something like, "What's your most embarrassing experience in a job," or something. And mine was, which I didn't get to tell, so I'm going to tell you now. I once fell down a compactor in Tesco's.
Oh my goodness!
And I'm like I was fine, but I was like hanging on for dear life, and nobody could ever see me. I worked at Tesco's, and when they put tannoys out, they're like, "Where is he?" "I'm in here."
Did you get rescued?
I did. Thank God.
You're not still there.
I'm still here. Yeah, but they couldn't believe it because I was so accident prone. I was pushing all the cardboard down. I went down with it.
See, these are the stories people don't get to tell, and it's amazing how candid and how honest people have been on the show. Well,
thank you so much for your time, and I wish you every success. You're one of my favourite new comedians, you know that, and I just want to wish you every success. I think what you do is fantastic, and all the very best to you. Thank you so much.
Well, you'll be there for it, so
exactly,
as you have been since the start. Thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
Thank you very much.